All right, we're back on the scene, and Tim's got this opened up. It's been severe thunderstorm warning us, but we're going to endeavor to persevere, and just take this big chunkage above us, the side panels, and then cut this bottom floor back, and probably have to do a rim joist repair at some point, but we'll get this covered up however we leave it. But I'd like to get this thing off the side of the house except for the roof extension, and that's another thing for another day, but we'll get that much done. And he's also exposed the rest of this LVL. So there's 18-inch tall LVL here, 16-inch there, so it's less of a notch. But I can't imagine, it must have been existing rims, like the wall was framed, and then somebody changed their mind and wanted to open this up, and they were uncomfortable. See, like this, if you cut that much out, it'll stand there, especially without being loaded with more outside wall to the house and stuff. So like at that point in time in the construction, then it makes sense to notch and slide a beam up as far up as you're comfortable. Over here, I guess it was the taller beam, the deepest they could stand notching that thing to have it hang out in space to get the beam installed on the build site and get rid of the under walls and loft this all out and do all of that. Or they would have had to do what we're doing and build temporary walls underneath all this stuff just to hold everything up, and they may have given a price and timeline on that, and it was going to be like, no, we could just do this, but the beam will stick down a little bit more, and then this one doesn't even need to be as big, but it can stick down to the same extent, and everything will be copacetic, and we'll keep building this thing. And somebody went, okay, and at that point they should have been like fired, because no, this isn't. So now we are going to do what you need to do, which is hold the construction up, make a clear space all the way across the ends of these, and we're not going to put hangers in with roofing nails, which is what they did. And there's only 2 layers in here, and the drawing calls for 3. The drawing calls for 3 LVLs of this dimension and 3 LVLs of that dimension. So we're without the protection of our safety margin here. Obviously, it's done the span this whole time. I thought it looked a little saggy. And maybe we'll check that. Maybe I could have done that before rolling the video, but I can just measure to the floor here and just see, or put the laser level on it. But we don't have our safety margins in that we should have here structurally. And so we're altogether gonna make some major improvements here. In fact, it looks a little canted right there, which is unnerving. So anyway, we're gonna get this thing right. But first things first, I'm gonna get this crap out of here. Okay, so that went in real nice, and I'm flush over here with the current rim joist that goes around. Over here, it's sitting back at the top, so you can kind of see that, yes, indeed, it's open. And nowadays, like I say, you go right on by this, right on by the sill plate, and you normally like to see a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of overhang over the foundation. Then you got house wrap, then you got siding, and essentially there's one homogeneous surface, or several homogeneous surfaces, all the way past all these horizontal layers that could, through capillary action, draw moisture in. You want just things as a best practice. And so this framing ends up, you put your foundation in the ground, you put your sill plate on, you put your rim joist flush to that, you put your subfloor down after you got your joists in here, it's trimmed flush to this, and your sole plate of your wall sits out here flush, and everything's flush, flush, flush. All the framing for this house is 1/2 inch inside of the framing on the foundation wall to account for the 1/2 inch thick sheeting. And I'll have to go into the basement and beat this out to plumb, but it's good enough for today to set that sheet out over here, and I'll commit to that here by nailing it up somewhere. So actually I can nail right sort of through all of this down into the corner of that to pin it, and over here I'll touch that up at another time. My piece is ready, and I'll put it in, and then we'll cover the opening and call it a day. But just a bizarre choice, because it just makes it takes a 1/2 inch, it makes a 1/2 inch change to, generally speaking, the drawing package for construction drawings is based on the outside surface of the framing, all the dimensions shown and all of that. Well, that's different by 1/2 inch from here to here, and over the overall width of a place on both ends, it changes things by 1 inch. So dimensions get funky because within the line weight of a given drawing, you've got some subtleties here that aren't accounted in there, and it just promotes just issues that hound you the entire journey of building the place. I don't know, but you can't fool us. We saw that, and we'll just copy what's here, because that's another thing. We can't really change to what should be done, because it creates more problems. You just got to stick to what there is for construction style. But no big. We'll get this uncovered later, and we'll make sure that that's right, and house wrap this, and then just keep her. Okay, so Tim got this all stripped, took the vinyl siding all away, and we're going to get real house wrap on, because it had some tinfoil like scraps on there and like dozens of pieces. I don't know what that deal was there. And so I told him, you know, take the deck board that's here against the wall off, and we'll look at the way the ledger slash beam works here. Now, I don't know exactly what I'm looking at because normally you have either a ledger or a beam. And the beauty of the beam is that you don't get tight to the structure, so that there's really no way for anything to build up and promote rot against the structure. And so there are posts and there is a beam, but the beam may as well, it's against the concrete enough for there to be a gap behind it where all this crap gets stuck. But nothing really touches the house, which I guess is ideal. But I mean, this beam didn't need to be snug at the house. There's no reason for it to be right over there. It could have been here. It could have been right across the top of those 4x4s. The little bit of cantilever that would have been there wouldn't have been a problem. And then, I don't know, that's all treated. But this is a aluminum flashed piece of white lumber across and underneath. And simply, that was all that was holding it. So, like, that should come down too. And it looks like everything's fine behind there, but man alive, this is a little place for critters to come in, bugs. And again, this sheathing should have gone right by. There's an aluminum piece of like drip edge or galvanized steel. I don't know what is happening here. It's all very theoretical. It's all kind of avant-garde. And so I just thought it was worth looking at that. So basically, long story short, that's what we're going to do here before we get house wrap. I went with a 9-foot roll of Tyvek. Now there are, it's debatable whether it's the very best. But anyway, it's a lot better than regular tarp wrap crap. Yeah, this is galvanized. I don't really know what this is doing. Other than, I guess, after the siding, making sure that it drips and doesn't zoop right in at the sill. Which, I'll be gosh darn it, I think that's white lumber sill. What a way to run a railroad. And like, oh no, we're a ledger attached to the concrete, sitting out at the top with a 2x4 that's also on a post. Yeah, somebody really didn't know how to start against the house. And to be honest with you, I would almost rather see a pair of treated 2x10 through locked to the side of these 4x4s and sitting up tight to the bottom of these joists and take the rest of this crap off. The problem is that working to put that up, then you've kept it to where you can't disconnect this thing. So maybe you could drill it so that you could take this hardware out of there once you've got the beam. But like, that's all nothing. That's not the way you make a deck. And the only reason they got away with it is because they put that against the concrete. And by the time you're in front of the exposed white sill and white lumber rim joist, nothing touches. And even though it's probably getting wet, it can dry out. And so that's like the craziest yet successful deck attachment that I've ever seen before. It looks like we had a little something here. And now actually we can finish cutting that rough opening and put a little repair strip there. And then the last thing that we need to do is get this window out of here. Now over here, no flashing tape. This is what that house wrap, like I said, looks like tinfoil, but it isn't even. But this had a little bit of moss between the J channel and the window from detritus and stuff blowing into that crack, rattling down, sitting together, getting moist, staying here in the shade for the most part, becoming a rotten organic matter to the point where algae and moss spores, mildew spores could get started growing in it. And then instead of shedding water naturally, this starts to collect moisture and wick it, and capillary action pulls it in to the structure, and you end up with a little bit of water damage. And so we're just going to make that a non-issue at the perfect time. Basically, you wouldn't want to go any farther than it's gone with that syndrome. And of course, we will house wrap and put window tray or a pan using flexible, it'll be zip flex tape. We'll make a pan, and that'll be flash out onto the house wrap. House wrap will go into the opening, then the window will go in with a nail flange, and then the nail flange will be zip taped to the house wrap, and this will all be the way that it should be. And I did say, you know, the rest of these are all the same. It's that crevice right there, but he said that he checked those out and he's looked at this, and it's not creating that same issue. So that's good, and it's something you want to check. I'm just waiting for my architect, who hasn't arrived yet, it looks like. But as soon as he gets here and we talk about these beams inside, we can keep moving. So I'm glad there's a few places here. We're glad to be addressing it right now, because it's only going to get worse. This is getting a little punky. This a little punky, this a little punky. This sheathing here was definitely punky, and this is even moist to the touch here, and it was getting the edge of the subfloor. Sorry, back this angle up there. It's getting a little wet there, but perfect. We'll get this all right, and then we'll use the correct anatomy and the beauty of polymer technology when we put it back together, and that kind of 15 to 25 years later syndrome won't happen, because we'll have all that stuff in place. And Tim's got his, what still seemed to me to be untreated 2x10. You have to tip the top back when you can and try to get it to come out. But the other end of it, this looked fine when we looked at this before. This other end is junk. So, perfect timing. Okay, we finished up last week, got this window out, and like these two we want to frame all the way around the opening to carry the OSB patch, and then we continued this stud layout through the space so that for the most part it's where it should be when you're looking for things for any given reason, for upper cabinets or anything like that. You don't want to muddy the water. This wall had a big door opening in it that someone framed shut, but when they framed it shut, it had nothing to do with the layout in the wall, as well as the extra jack and header, which had Tim scratching his head when he came to do his built-in here, because again, nothing seemed to make very much sense. So we do what we can to maintain status quo for a layout. Over here, we're going to just reduce the rough opening size, and so we don't want a piece. We want a piece on either side to carry the edges of the OSB, and across the bottom, it just is a best practice, because in the case here, you have it across the bottom. You could just throw a layout in here and allow that to carry things, but I don't mind an extra stick, and it allows me to literally put that patch down all the way around its perimeter, kind of every 6 to 8 inches, rather than just once or twice, and in this case once, which would have been kind of an annoying sort of situation, even though we're going to tape that seam. So as a best practice. Now the top, we won't put a plate on to catch the top edge of the OSB, because that would bring the header of our window opening 1.5 inches downward, where it's got, because it was an opening before, it's got a 2x4 plate and a header in there, and that's currently at that exact elevation. So moving it down, you'd never know, but we want to remember that that's the case, and we're just going to make this rough opening smaller, so we'll just step the sides in and bring the bottom up. So we're going to keep that in mind. But to start with, I'm going to take my circular saw and a pen and a chalk line, and I'm going to go outside. I brought the OSB around, just kept it outside, no reason to bring it in. These two spaces or patches are going to be the same size. They'll be undersized enough to make sure that I'm not going to walk up and get jammed up on the edges. It doesn't need to be any better than 1/4 inch, sort of a gap all the way around will be fine. So I'll measure up what I've got for an opening, and then I'll take 1/2 inch off, and that'll, like I say, preserve about 1/4 inch gap all the way around. And I'll make them right out here in the shade. I walked them in from the truck. I'm actually just going to plot out. There's more than 1/2 of a sheet in both, so I'm going to line the sheets up, tip them against the wall at an angle, plot that out like you would drywall on an edge, and just cut it out, the pieces right out, and let them fall out on the ground. No need for sawhorses, no need to go inside, nothing. Then we'll just pull the plastic off quick, throw the patches back in, and tape over with flashing tape, because I can tell that the AC is still sort of in this space, thankfully, because of the plastic. And all the more we hang out in the hot day and let it push through, there's basically no R value here, and it's going to heat up. So let's get those holes covered up and taped, and just try to keep our cool temperatures in there as much as possible. Everything that we can do here beyond just the craftsmanship of the work to try and help out and be efficient in our process. So like I say, I'll measure it up, make these patches and put them in, and then I go inside and hide because it's starting to get really hot. And I should have worn a tank top today, but I just got the old 100% cotton t-shirt blanket. All right, Tim's gonna finish the taping on that, which will make, in theory, one sort of homogeneous exterior in the sheathing. We put zip board up now that is sheathing shear strength in the OSB component, and then it's house wrap in that green coating or whatever that you see, whatever color the coating is on there. And then you zip tape between every single sheet and you're all set. Now we're gonna house wrap this, so we shouldn't need to zip tape every seam, but these seams we will, just because they're larger, and they are also right at ends and stuff in the framing. So if you have a little buggy who gets underneath your house wrap, he can go right in the gap in the sheathing, and he can go right in the gap of the framing. Then he's in your wall. So like, then you have to do this here, which is our problem over on the other side. In the vinyl exterior corner at the top where the soffit is, there's a little wasp nest, and that's where we're gonna start our house wrap, right up there. So I gotta go up. I was just tipping this out to get, so we can start the house wrap basically at the corner of the house. And there's a little wasp, so I'll let the kids come through so they don't get stung, and we'll kill them, and then we'll keep going. Well, that went fairly smoothly. Our big problem was, let's start with you want the printed side out, because Tyvek, not house wrap, which is like a tarp, but real DuPont Tyvek, breathes moisture one way. It'll let it out of the house, and then behind the siding, any kind of condensation or even literally water getting behind there won't come through it in that direction. So you want the print side out. And I hate to have it upside down because it's super unprofessional. It's something I laugh at all the time when I'm driving around, but the way it comes off the roll dictates that. And so we needed the roll on the left to be able to pull it out to the right, to have it to read correctly, again, as just a professional thing, and then having the right side facing out. So rather than having the roll over there and pulling it in, we came from this side. I just put a little tape on a broomstick. I was going to use my one of my zip wall poles, but the little knuckle that tightens it, because it's like a tension rod, was too big to go into the Tyvek tube. So This was enough in there, of about 3 feet in the tube, a couple feet out, that held our bottom edge of the tube right along at the elevation that we wanted. Pair of pliers on some tape so we don't mess up the pole, and then we pulled it through like you saw, stapled it across the top on all these little marks across the top, got around the corner, made sure our elevation was correct, and then I could cut my way through all this stuff, and I cut through floating on stuff, and then I can see where it is exactly, and I can kind of eyeball the distance to allow the tape to go down to wood, in this case onto the nail flange and onto the Tyvek. I could have left enough to go into this opening later when they do a door swap and folded it back and sided over it, I was telling Tim, but you can add to Tyvek with Tyvek tape and more Tyvek. So like say you had me do a patio door here someday, I take your trim off and stuff, I see what happened here. When I get the opening ready, I'll extend your house wrap into the opening, flash it correctly, put the new door, flash it again, whatever. So this was a nice way to keep moving, and we've certainly improved upon what was here before. We ran out of zip tape, so we've got to get a little bit more to finish up some of this stuff. We also went right up and underneath the aluminum threshold on this door, so we got a real nice moisture seal, because there's no pan, there's no aluminum pan, there's no flashing tape of any kind. It's just the raw exposed rim joist on this house, the way that it was constructed, the raw edge of the subfloor, and the aluminum threshold set down into it, which is just remarkable to me. So we made a significant improvement there, although you could say that it's going to hold moisture, but we're not going to have any in here because we're going to tape down the sides, then we're going to tape across the top, and they haven't had trouble so far without any of that. Really, you want to make the opening waterproof and then put the equipment in the opening. So Tim's calling out to me. He's getting things done around the corner. I'm coming.
No, I'm good.
Oh, we're gonna see what you got going over here. I cut out the little window hole because I think we're gonna try and pop him in today. So we did the eye cut, which is flush the bottom, flush the top, through the middle of the Tyvek, take the side pieces inside, staple them down, and I cut halfway so my zip tape can stick to either side. But first, I'm gonna put a pan in there the way that it should have, and that'll go up either side, and that'll be done with the Zip System stretch tape. You can do it with zip tape. I just like the stretch because that compound corner will be something that I can just pull out, especially on a hot day like today, and make it stretch out and form to it. So we'll put the pan in. Drinking seltzers. Put the pan in the stretch tape, which will be flush to the inside of the framing, up the side, I don't know, maybe 6 inches or something, flush the inside of the framing, 3 sides here, and then out and around this corner, out and down, out and around that corner, and the stretch will happen on the outside there. And with that on, I'll zip down onto it, regular zip tape on both sides, zip across the top. And then we would put the window in. So I suppose I will be going out to get a roll of zip tape today. And then once the window's in and nailed through the flange, then I'll do zip tape over it again. Some people may not put the zip tape on the sides or stuff, wait till you've installed it and then zip tape it down. I just as soon do it all, both layers. That way the opening itself has got a nice watertight layer, and the equipment has also got protection between it and the watertight layer. It's just how I like to see things. And then when we're done with that, we'll create stuff the gappage, and that'll be in. The framing went all into the opening, but I will say, there's really a lot of thermal bridging. There's always a lot of thermal. The wood has just got a terrible R value versus the insulation. So a place like this is always going to feel kind of cooler to the touch, especially because you can kind of see the light. Not that you should have a draft there, but that's a case of we want to see that seam outside and tape it, because that's going to be kind of a delta T situation. Anyway, that's going to be a lot of thermal bridging. This is not a lot of thermal bridging again because we needed a king, 2 jacks. You had a king and a jack on this old window. You had the frame to return this siding, and then we stuck this here because that's the layout stud, and if you were following layout, you'd be missing here and you'd be irritated. So where am I going with this? I think I'd like to see what amounts to a jack. And there was no king in here because I don't think it's particularly necessary. You got a king over here you got a king here and a jack under the original header, then this thing. So anyway, I still think I want those through there and through there, because anybody who does anything here is going to assume that with this window hole, which is all that they can see, there'll be a jack and a king, and there won't even be a king there. So something tells me it'd be nice to extend the framing down just gets frustrating when it isn't there for whatever reason. It is more to drill through for our gas line, although I think we're going to come up for the stove. More to drill through for our electricity, although I think we'll be coming through up here where it is already. So it's a best practice. We'll have that and we'll finish that out. But that'll be kind of the end of our framing. And we'll do the same with this window installation after that. And then we'll be down to putting drywall boards back up on here and turn around, focus more on our temporary walls, and then pulling our beams out and doing what it is we're going to do with those, although we haven't decided yet, so stay tuned. Unfortunately, running the phone all day, it died before we put the windows in, and a lot like painting, boy, make more noise, bud. A lot like painting, all the time and energy is spent getting ready in preparation to do the good paint job. And the same goes for window and door installation. You want to get the openings right. And so you can see my stretch tape pan, which is called a pan because it used to be built out of flashing trim coil aluminum. And the seams would have been built to shed water, and it would have been folded up and sealed with a caulking material. Now we've just got crazy polymer tech like that stretch tape and then the zip tape itself around there. And so we got the Tyvek over the opening, and then I did what's called an I cut, which is cutting it flush across the top and the bottom of the opening and splitting it in the middle, making what is basically an uppercase or a capital I. And then you pull the side pieces of Tyvek into the opening. Now I cut them down the middle of the stud's thickness, so I've got Tyvek going into the opening, and then if I use flashing tape, or the zip tape is the same width as a 2x4 with the sheathing on it anyway, it's 4 inches, and I'm half on the Tyvek, and then the other half, the back half of the flash tape is on the edges of the framed opening. Thereby you have an opening that's got the stretch tape pan and Tyvek taken into the sides and zip taped sides, and the top zip taped into the opening, and then the window goes in, and the nail flange is you nail that in all the way around to the framing, and then we go across the bottom onto the nail flange with zip tape, then down the sides so the tail end of the sides are out onto the lower course of zip tape, and finally across the top so the top is over the edges, it's over the top ends of the side flashing tape. So you've got tape applied as a best practice in a way that would shed water if it should lift or anything else like that, which it shouldn't, and you've got an opening that's fully waterproofed as well. And all together you got a really nice window install, and it's much nicer than it used to be. Okay, and inside the windows, I made sure that they worked out to be about flush with drywall when it goes up, and they're locked in place with the window and door foam. No shim packs on these. We just made sure the sashes were moving well and that the sides were plumb with a nice long level, and that's looking good. Tim's got the siding coming back together on this side. I got a new box outside today. I got white 4-inch clapboard from two different suppliers. We pulled the stick out from each box, held it up, and there was a clear winner. So we'll take the other box back, and one box is about 2 square, and that's about what we got on this wall. And so altogether it'll be new siding, and on the wall that you kind of see and deal with more so, there'll be far fewer seams. Where he was using some pieces, and there's a few more seams on that side, but that's like the absolute, that's the D side of the house basically, and so no problem there. Tim got his temporary wall up here. We need another one underneath it in the basement, and then this is the roof, but over here we need one on the second floor in their bedroom, and then we've got all of the loads translated out and down to the basement floor through these temporary walls on this beam, and so he can be removed and replaced. And then when we're done with his removal and replacement, we'll come over here and we'll just move this lumber and stuff over to this side, and we'll remove and replace this one. We're starting with the longer one, but really this is something I'm super comfortable with doing. So normally as a best practice, you should probably rough your if you have a situation like this and you don't have a lot of experience with it, I would make everything happen on the smaller span with the lighter weight, beam, and then come over and replicate your process here. These aren't long enough. We're going to increase our span by at least taking that wall out and putting the end of our new beam in that exterior wall to here, so it's greater than this. And we're going to reduce this post size, so this is going to be a greater span because we're not going to pull an abutment or a bulkhead wall out underneath that. So this will be a greater span. So both of those will come out, and they're perfectly usable for something else. In fact, they're going to be handy to separate if that's what needs to happen, because there's only like a dozen fasteners or fewer in them. Now, We're going to go to the minimum possible bearing underneath the ends of the two new beams, and then wait to see, because it'll be solid, you won't be able to put any switches in it or anything else. Wait to see how the cookie crumbles in the rest of this project here. Because to start with, we're going to go with 3 layers here and 3 layers there. There should be, especially once you go all the way over to the far wall, you need another layer of LVL here. It'll be 18 inches, so it'll be the same dimensions. And we looked at a steel plate between 2 layers, but the safety margin just isn't big enough. And so we just go to 3 layers, and it's just fine. Even in going much taller, up to 24 and stuff, and having steel, it really doesn't affect believe it or not, the safety margin in that new span doesn't get big enough nearly as much as if we just add another layer of 18-inch LVL. Much handier to deal with just the LVL. The steel thing is a whole special order. It's more expense. It'll be perforated because it has to be 3/8 of an inch thick, believe it or not. And then you got to start matching the perforations and laminating it differently. I don't care to do any of that. So we'll go with 3 layers of 18-inch LVL here, cent flush. We'll do 3 layers here, and it'll be probably 11 1/4 that we use. And then the whole face of this wall will be brought out in this direction to accommodate that thickness. Although I suppose alternatively, if we didn't want to do that, we could recut all these joists back. I'll have to ask. See, because right now this face is flush with the framing for the exterior wall of the second floor. And so really adding a layer out here adds strength to the beam, but doesn't load that layer directly, where in here, it doesn't necessarily load it directly either, but I wonder if it's 6 1/2 dozen. Because we are going to be able to cut those back because the hangers are going away and all of that. So we could snap a new line, take another 2 inches off, and have plenty of room to put a 3rd layer in. So we'll either do that, or we'll put the layer on this side of the new beams and fur this whole wall out in terms of thickness. And in either case, if we end up wanting controls on this post, you can fur one side or both sides or the other of the post out in this way, making it thicker to put switch boxes into it. Or we can pull in a superfluous construction or unnecessary construction, just making it longer, keeping it its existing width. Because, of course, it's already going to be another 2 inches wider. I'm kind of loath to make it even wider because for its length, the aspect ratio turns into one big squarish rectangle, and it's just hard to decide on whether to drywall it and how to lose it in the footprint of the kitchen if it isn't big enough to back a cupboard up to and hang a cabinet onto it. I'd rather see this thing grow in length, and of course the customer is going to think or say it obstructs kind of sight lines, but I think the more of a wall that you have like this, the more of a chance you could put a work surface on it or a cupboard on it, or at least use it as a full wall for any other type of a thing, a family calendar, one side or the other, whatever. I would argue that you're better off longer and thinner than you are shorter and fatter, because you kind of can't make or destroy energy. You're going to want switches here, I think, because you're not going to want to run to that end of the kitchen or this end of the kitchen or over to the far wall to get the lights set up in the living room, dining room, kitchen, and dinette entryway. I think a central location for system controls is going to become handy, and so we're going to have to just take this as it comes and not set out with a rigid locked-in plan. And it's way easier to do that. Of course, it happens when there's a more conventional project, but when you've got one person at the top of a design build project like this, it's easier to know what has to be decided now and what could wait until later, and kind of put that off to the right time. And in the end, you get what you wanted, and it's generally cheaper and takes less time than coordinating all the moving parts and leaving things loose. Normally, when there's a bunch of different subs and it's a quick moving project, you need to be working from the same final plan, and changes to the plan are change orders, and they add a lot of complexity, and subs get out of order, have to go away, do another project before they can come back. Not knowing whether you want electricity here kind of puts off any electrical work from happening until you're sure of it. And that means all this outside wall electrical work can't happen until you're sure of that, so you can get the electrician in here. And without the electricity routed over here, it can't be covered and have cabinets installed, and some other things start getting held up over this decision, and problems like that can arise. Where I can come and, I don't like to, but I can come and go from electrical or leave that a part of it, to wait if we need to. So benefits to design build. There you go. We use 10-foot sticks here because they fit far enough away from the beam. I think we're going to come and go, out with the old in with the new through the patio door, so we may have to move some of these sticks down and leave the opening here, but we can play a little jazz with that. And in the end, basically now today, I'm gonna hold off until I've had those conversations with the homeowner and we lock in our decision to just do the maximum structural situation and wait and see if we want to fill it in at all. I think that's the safest bet. Even if they don't change things now, they could be changed later. And so it's not all that much more cost to get the longest possible LVL for their span. We're not going to saving a foot and deciding, you know, if I add to that wall and we end up not needing a foot of the overall LVL span that we bought, saves us $50 or something, you know, not less than $100 difference. So I think it's worth flexing on that and just getting the biggest possible spans and coming back later. So I'm going to set up and put siding up out here. We got a best match white. I tried 2 different colors. We saw the one that makes the most sense, and so it's just going back on. I'm going to use the starter strip that's on here, even though it's galvanized. Even though there's plastic starter strip used at the top, it's like they didn't know how to use it. But I'll put what I can on here before I got to go get some J-channel to go around this window. We got J-channel on this either side of the door, and the new PVC kind of kick plate here, which is in front of a fully flashed to Tyvek penetration for the patio door, meaning it's 100% waterproof now too, which is a huge improvement. And then we get all done with the siding, he can put his deck board back. So I'm just going to put some siding up today, and tomorrow I think we'll begin in getting ready. Oh, the other thing I'll mention with this structural situation is that you can see that this bows out and away from the one side that's loaded and the other side that's got nothing holding against it. And so when we come back here with our new beam, we'll put a steel strap along the bottom of every joist, under the beam and up the face of the beam, and, you know, fill all the penetrations in that. And they may not even have to be every joist, maybe 4 feet on center or something, but that'll pull that and keep that in straight. As long as our cuts are straight and everything, then there won't be any more of this sort of situation here. And so we'll make a bunch of improvements here and get everything that we kind of wanted in one fell swoop now by just being careful. And then next week will be all of that type of thing. So let's just finish up this siding. Okay, so if you know me, you know that I really don't care for just J-channel around windows and doors. Their windows next door have got our casement windows, and right on board they've got more frame, and it ends up looking kind of like trim, even though I can't stand the look of a casement window in almost every case. No pun intended. And then on this house, you might expect to see trims on the front and even the other sides, probably never the back. And we've looked at this at other houses I've worked on before, but like across the street, there's no trims. Over there, right with the brick, there's no trim. There's no trims on those. There's shutters and no trim. And, same thing here. Shutters, no trim. I didn't scare you guys off with the music, did I?
No, we're good.
Okay. So we won't put trim on the back because of all the sides of the house. They do have a nice backyard, so there's an argument to be made for trimming these windows that we're putting in now. But really, more importantly, we've got a lot of inside work to do, and it's not a part of this project necessarily, and it would slow me down quite a bit. We put the J-channel back around the patio door and didn't end up trimming. And so the thing is, you can trim after the siding's on if you want to do a little bit of surgery, or someday somebody resides this entire house and wants to make the investment to trim all the windows and doors. That would be the time, and you kind of do them all together. So I've brought it up with customers in the past, but again, it's going to be great that we button the back of this house all back up again and be done outside and move our efforts to the inside for the rest of the project. And the sooner the better, because there's big fish to fry in here. So that's why we're not going to ultimately use any PVC trims. We put that down there because that's an important component. You wouldn't want siding to run right through there because it gets kicked and dinged, and it's just not the type of thing that you want to see there. So we won't go out and get any trim, and we're going to get the J-channel from in the garage that was taken off the house. There's some nice long pieces, and we'll wrap this window with J, and then we can do our next course of siding and hopefully get to a point where, at that point, it's 3 or 4 pieces at this length with a notch, 3 or 4 pieces at that length with a notch, and then like one course above the window, and I guess a little bit of a rip at the top just to get it to blend in, and we're done. And then on the other side of the door, of course, all the same pieces over there, all the same width. So relatively quick and easy, although it's coming up on 5. Probably won't finish it up today. We'll get J-channel around that window and probably up both sides of it, and leave across the top and down this side probably for Tim tomorrow. He could futz with that, and I'll probably try to get started on the structural stuff. But we've also got that support wall to build in the basement, and the support wall to build in the upstairs bedroom. Probably won't get to ripping and tearing on structural stuff this week, but we'll get all the necessary peripheral construction done, and then set about that next week. Well, there's a couple square, one box. There's just a couple pieces left, and they'll go right here and right there. And I don't know, we may have to go buy 1 or 2 more pieces to finish up here. And we'll need 2 pieces of J channel, it looks like, maybe 3 to get across the top. And then we got to move this little roof section back, get the gutters off, and have our gutter guy come and put 1 piece gutter all the way back through there. And that'll kind of be the end of working outside. Tim can put his deck board back. This is just got to get taped in here behind this outside corner, and then the outside corner nailed down. And I want to do something about the wasps living in this corner from below and above. That wasn't quite right, but we'll do what we can here. But between that being plugged up and this chimney box being gone and this roof thing being fixed up, try to see where they were coming in. You know, it's the tiniest little opening, but that's all it takes. I want to say they're probably coming in over there because that's where the nest is. And I can't imagine they'd come all the way through and then set up shop there. So it had to be over there that they were working. And so when we're taking that apart, we'll have a real close look. But another thing about no trim here is it doesn't stand out so badly because everything's white. When the siding's a dark color, then you start to notice the small aspect ratio going around such a big window. And you really want to see something this big because it just ends up looking more premium. Just as you get the whole house, the windows where they are, everything's all the same, but you trim all those things and it really can make a nice looking house, you know, put it over the top. So we're not doing that, like I say, on this one, but it's something they could do down the road. And then we'll get started in here as soon as we know what we're doing.
I can do this later.
No, you're good, man. Tim's getting that F and then J channel up. So we've got F channel carrying the soffit and then J channel returning the top edge of the clapboard. We got this taped and the corner put down. I put some pest control foam in the top and bottom of these corners. I got the bottom of that corner. I got the top area up there. Over there where the ladder is, they were actively coming and going. So whoever was home is all covered in foam. And let's see, finish J channel around that window. Gotta do J channel on the other window around the corner. I'm just trying to get things right so that Tim can work this weekend to finish that up. He's got the fascia extended. We were saying how fast that was to cut that roof system back there. The rafters in there were the exact same as the rest to the eaves, and then they had 2x6 extensions, so I could follow the plumb cut on these rafters and just recut all the extensions exactly where they needed to be to carry the fascia extension. And then the edge of the shingles came through. Now the roof has got a second layer of shingles since the first roof went up, but the edge of the shingle detail was perfectly aligned to the rest of the eave. So I went up on top and cut it back up there with the oscillating saw. And in the end, everything's going to be perfect there. I'm going to probably sneak that piece of drip cap out because it's short and it's got a hole through it there. I'd like to come back with 1 piece of aluminum fascia, 1 piece of drip slipped up and around, probably with some of this, rather, because we can't nail it, we'll put a bead of this roof and flashing on the top of it and lift the shingles and stick it down up there, and that ought to be really well attached for our purposes. I did reach through cutting over here with the Sawzall up through the first inch of the entire shingle layer, and I was like where Tim's at, I could see light right through there. So I'm going to pump a little bit of this up through there as well as a best practice, short of making a big shingle repair, which I don't think is necessary. And we got our gutter guys on the hook to come in, probably take the rest of this down and put a 1-piece seamless up, go back to the downspouts on both ends, and we'll be in really nice shape. Over here, he's just got to do some J channel around his window and finish his siding.
That's a heck of a big horsefly.
Hey, yeah, he's looking for somebody to poke. Thinks he's on a cow's belly, but the joke's on him because it's plastic. And we've got soffit left over from the roof overhang that was on the chimney bump out. So we'll just put the same soffit stuff back in there. It's cut probably to exactly the right size and everything like that. Oh, and the blocking that you can see, I added pest block foam around it, but just left and just right, there's no blocking. It's just the raw ends of the fiberglass bat. And he does have styrofoam baffle though, but I don't know where that goes. And now that I'm thinking about it, because there's no ridge vent, on this roof, but there is styrofoam baffle that takes the, ostensibly, I don't know what the deal is with that. So it's too bad, but someday if somebody continues to have problems, they could pull the vinyl soffit out and block between every other rafter hole here on both directions. So it's just, we've gained knowledge at least. We could go and do something like that if it was, you know, a huge problem here, but it isn't so far, so good. And then, yeah, next week we're gonna get working on the inside, ripping and tearing on the beams just as soon as I get some new beam material in here. And we've also maybe thought about reusing the pair of 18-inch LVLs, doing the bigger span. We were supposed to do 3 layers of 18 over there and 3 layers of 11 1/4 over here, but there's a chance, and I have to ask the architect if 2 layers of 18-inch LVL can be used in this case, because what it means is we can basically cut this pair shorter and reuse it over here without having to go out and buy, I don't know, 30 feet of inch or 11 1/4 LVL to do a whole new beam. In any event, we'll sell on what's usable here, or I'll trade them the value back on their material budget, since I sometimes have use of stuff like that. But we're gonna finish this up for the weekend. Really nice last few days. We're working outside, mid-70s, breezy, and we're, you know, out of the sun here if we're close enough to the house. So this has just been sort of a cream puff, and that being ready to cut. Oh, the OSB deck on that chimney bump out was an additional piece that stopped right at the original edge to the entire eaves. So like all I had to do, if you saw us fold it up, that I didn't have to cut that. It was the perfect seam lined up with the rest of the roof. Just a lot of nice things there. As much belly aching as I've done about the builder and some of the weird choices, they put this together in such a way that it was really easy to take apart. So I'll give them that.